And welcome to this very special occasion. This is the second event where we've invited our honored guest today, compañera Rigoberta Menchú, to join us. This year, the Martin Luther King Jr. Planning Committee has decided to take a break from tradition, and rather than simply inviting you to a beautiful celebration commemorating all of the events of Martin Luther King Jr. Week here at the University of Utah, we thought it would be helpful for us to deepen the conversation about indigenous rights and invite you and other guests to join us for a sort of informal conversation about the kinds of issues that Mrs. Menchú brought up today during her talk, and other issues that relate to the state of Utah as well. So we're very happy that you were able to join us, and again, on behalf of the MLK Junior Planning Committee, if I could take a moment actually and ask them to stand, because they really have done the work over the last year in getting us to where we are today. If you'll stand so we can recognize you, please. And I'd also like to point out that the College of Education once again has served as a very important partner for us in sponsoring this year's Martin Luther King Jr. celebrations. They volunteered last year to a 2-year commitment of sponsorship in many different ways, and I'm happy to say that they've done a tremendous job as inaugural co-sponsors of MLK. College of Science doesn't know this yet, but they will be invited to be our partners for the following year. So what I'd like to do is to describe to you what the committee believes the approach we ought to take this afternoon in this panel conversation. What we'd like to do is to extend a couple of questions to our guests and hope that they not only respond to the questions, but perhaps engage each other in a conversation about those issues so we can get a couple of levels deeper and get their expert perspectives on these points. Let me begin by introducing to you, for those of you that aren't completely familiar with our guests, who our panelists are today. We'll begin with, of course, our honored guest, Ms. Rigoberta Menchú, who, as you know, is our 1992 Nobel laureate. One of the things that you probably don't know is that she tells us she's equally excited about being identified as a wife and as a mother, and in fact was very excited about her husband recently telling me yesterday that he threw her a big party, a big fiesta, to celebrate her 50th anniversary on this earth. So she's very happy to acknowledge that. I'd also like to introduce to you, for those of you that meet and don't know who he might be, our president, President Young, who very graciously agreed to be a part of this panel and lent some of his international expertise on the topic to this important conversation, as well as Mr. Forrest Kutch, who is the Executive Director of Indian Affairs here for the state of Utah, and once again, very indebted to Professor Fernando Rubio for agreeing to help interpret the comments by Senora Menchú. So let me start with just a very quick and simple question addressed to our guest, Mrs. Menchú. Can you tell? I'm going to read it in English, and then perhaps maybe you can translate if she needs that kind of help. A lot of changes are taking place in the Americas with respect to indigenous rights, derechos indígenas. And the movements currently taking place in Mexico, in Central and in South America around land rights is especially interesting. What does the land rights movement tell us? Tell us around the world in terms of indigenous rights and reclaiming their history, their land, and their identity.
Bueno, primero buenas tardes, good evening again. Thank you for this opportunity, and I am very happy. I like this city, and thank you for relationship with you, and thank you. Yo creo que hay unos logros. We had successful in last 20 years in Latin America. This successful is one, we broke the silence. We broke the silence. Now you can go in different place, in different country, and our indigenous peoples, it's not es invisible. It's not
They're not invisible.
Invisible. Also, you can take relationship with our people in the communities. It's not only for antropólogos, no solo para antropólogos, sociólogos, investigadores. Los indígenas ya no están solo para antropólogos, sino están para los cambios sociales. Creo que estos son logros muy importantes.
Indigenous peoples are not there just for anthropologists and sociologists to do research on. They're an important factor in social change.
Y también uno de los logros es que la voz de los pueblos indígenas ha trascendido en la historia, a pesar de sufrimiento, de dolor, a pesar de muchas injusticias, pero su testimonio está presente. Son actores de su propio testimonio.
And the biggest achievement is the fact that the voice of indigenous people lives on. In spite of all the suffering and all the pain, their voice lives on.
Y también yo veo como logro el intento de encontrar un diálogo nacional, un diálogo con los sectores que nunca dialogaron con los pueblos indígenas. A través de las instituciones, muchos critican que las iniciativas son como ventanillas indígenas que crearon los gobiernos. Pero a través de esas ventanillas indígenas también se creó un diálogo.
And another important achievement is the fact that governments and institutions are now willing to talk to the indigenous peoples. And in the past, it was criticized as window dressing, basically. But things have happened as a result of that dialogue.
Tenemos algunos espacios que son producto de nuestras luchas. No son regalos, sino son producto de nuestras luchas.
And we have made achievements that are the product of our struggles and our fight. Nobody gave them to us.
Y el hecho de que nosotros sabemos que es producto de nuestra lucha, también nos da una perspectiva diferente. Es muy diferente decir a mi hijo que somos oprimidos, que somos los más pobres de la tierra, que somos los humillados, que somos los más marginados. Y ese niño crece con una autoestima muy abajo, que decir a nuestros hijos, hemos luchado, hemos triunfado, hemos salido adelante y vamos a salir adelante.
And it makes a big difference. I can now tell my son, I don't have to tell him that we are the humiliated ones and the ones who suffer. I can tell my son that we have fought and that we have made great achievements. And
struggle, no tanto fight, porque es la lucha, ¿no? Entonces, ser víctima y considerarse víctima es diferente que ser víctima y considerarse una luz para los cambios, como actor de cambio.
Being a victim and seeing yourself as a victim is different from being a victim and seeing yourself as an actor of change, as an inspiration to other people.
Por supuesto que la crisis mundial pasa también por los pueblos indígenas.
There's a crisis that also affects the indigenous people.
Crisis económico. Si nosotros hemos sido los más pobres, se imaginan lo que nos afecta la crisis económica directamente.
Of course, the financial crisis hits the poor even harder than anybody else.
La crisis política, donde muchos de nuestros países ya no hay partido político, hay agrupación política. Y cada periodo electoral, la agrupación política hace su campaña perversa, pero no hay militancia política.
And there's also a political crisis. In a lot of our countries, there are no political parties anymore. There are only political groups. And those political groups, every time there's an election, they have violent campaigns.
Entonces hay mucha transfugismo de partidos, de grupos. Guatemala es un ejemplo de esto. Las elecciones pasadas habían 22 partidos políticos disputando la presidencia, 14 candidatos presidenciales en un país donde votan solamente 8 millones de gente o menos, 7 millones de gente.
And Guatemala is a very good example of that. In a country where only 8 million people vote, there were 22 political parties in the past elections and 14 presidential candidates running for president.
Cada candidato es una ciudad pequeña, pero que quiere disputar los espacios. Esa guerra ya no es guerra ideológica, sino es una confusión total de qué es lo que se quiere del país, ¿no?
Each candidate is a small village, and all those little villages are at war with one another.
Y todo esto hace que los pueblos indígenas reafirman su identidad. Y creo que el tema de la identidad es muy importante.
That's why the indigenous peoples emphasize the issue of identity.
Somos mayas. En Guatemala cada vez usted escucha que somos mayas y la gente se siente orgulloso de ser maya.
We're Mayan, and in Guatemala you'll hear people say that they're proud to be Mayan.
Y no choca contra el sistema, pero intenta entender el sistema.
And people don't go against the system, precisely. They try to understand the system.
Y finalmente, creo que es muy importante saber que terminaron los conflictos armados en Centroamérica. O sea, para Guatemala haber pasado una guerra cruenta, sangrienta, y no es la vía. Entonces, ¿qué es la vía? Si no es la vía la lucha armada, ¿qué otra vía tenemos para la libertad?
It's important to emphasize that the armed conflict is over in Central America because we've realized that that is not the way, that there must be another way to freedom.
Entonces viene la lucha política, la lucha por ocupar los espacios, la lucha por entender el sistema y cómo debemos de plantearnos frente al sistema.
And that's when we become politicized and we struggle to understand the system and what our role is within the system.
Y yo creo que hoy estamos en una oportunidad. Si no aprovechamos esta oportunidad, tampoco creo yo que estamos exentos de nuevos conflictos en el futuro. O sea, están latentes las armas, están latentes la pobreza, el hambre, la falta de trabajo, la falta de oportunidades.
And today we have an opportunity that we need to take advantage of because otherwise we will be facing more conflict in the future.
Por el momento, la violencia no es por razones étnicas o no es por razones de represión instaurado desde el Estado, sino son otros factores. Es la corrupción, el crimen organizado, el narcotráfico que, que entra adentro de las instituciones, y creo que es el problema en México, es el problema en Guatemala, es el problema de muchos países donde el narcotráfico, la corrupción y el crimen organizado son como los factores más importantes que tenemos en la agenda, ¿no?
And the most important items and problems in the agenda today are not ethnically related. They're related to the organized crime, drug trafficking, and corruption.
President Young, Mr. Kutch, would you like to add anything to those statements?
Well, first of all, I would like you to interpret to her that it's not every day that you get to sit next to one of your lifelong heroes, participate in a panel discussion. I'm very honored.
Es un honor poder estar sentado al lado de uno de sus héroes de toda la vida.
While our guest was speaking, it occurred to me, and this is becoming more and more evident to me each day that I live, that I'm becoming more and more convinced that the indigenous people, their needs can benefit. Let's see, it doesn't come off the way I wanted to say this. We need each other. You know what I'm trying to say? In the past, our relationship has been, well, we need to exterminate the ignorant savage or educate them to our way of life as quickly as possible, you see. And supposing that all of the civilization processes were successful and assimilation was accomplished 100%, my guess would be that most of the wilderness areas that we presently have would be developed. Pollution would probably be 10 times more existent, not only throughout our country, but throughout the world. My guess is that if you carry what our guest shared with us earlier today, that she said, you have the spiritual laws, and you have physical laws, and you have certain people clinging to spiritual laws and certain people clinging to physical laws. There's probably going to be some conflict, okay? And there might not be conflict if one group takes over the other. But my guess is that it will create such an imbalance in this world that it will create catastrophic disaster. So what I'm suggesting is that our world, our very complex, dynamic, scientific world, needs the indigenous people more than ever before, because it's those spiritual laws that are being ignored today. We've become a world of science and development at no cost. If you watch TV, as we watched this morning, most of the commercials are dominated by the pharmaceutical industry, telling people what they need to take in order to be healthy. Not one word of prevention, not one word about substance, spirit, anything. It's, we got to get something, we got to buy something, and it's created a rat race. So I'm just going to suggest that we need to understand that the indigenous people are here for a reason, and we have something to offer. Because what we've done so far hasn't worked, okay? It hasn't worked. I just came from the Capitol, and we were in a meeting discussing Homeland Security operations, and the tribes were complaining that they were not receiving their appropriations, and the liaisons were not working with the respective tribes in their area. And I heard the lead liaison person say, well, the problem is that state government is set up to work with counties, and counties encompass cities, and so that's just the way it is, legally or governmentally. And he went on, and I finally stood up and said, you know, sir, that's not correct. First of all, most of the statutes, including the Homeland Security Act, made reference to tribes as an integral parts of state government and U.S. government. Furthermore, your liaisons need to know that those tribes are just as legitimate as any county government, and their authorities are almost equivalent to state government. The tribes report directly to Washington in most instances. The allocations come through state government. It creates problems because state government is not familiar with the authorities of the tribes, so consequently we have problems. But I'm constantly having to give presentations throughout the state to remind folks of the legitimacy of tribal government, of the indigenous people, that they fought and died for their territory, their lands, and their governments, their jurisdiction, and that their authority comes from international law in the form of a treaty. And so I just wanted to share that with you in relation to this. So we are constantly having to deal with issues like this. And by the way, Octavio, that the question of land rights, even in the beginning, our people always perceived land differently, completely different. We have a different, the Germans call it Weltanschauung. We have a different worldview about everything. We viewed the world as the lands as being a part of the people, and we viewed it as territories. When it came to surveying, linear dissecting of the land is very foreign to us, and owning of those lands also. So the worldviews have been and continue to be completely contrary. And so those of us that deal with government, it's such a challenge to try to operate within those two spheres. So,
May I pick up on that relationship between government and rights? In 2007, and let me direct this question to President Young. In 2007, the United Nations, 143 countries in the United Nations, signed off on the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. The Declaration is not legally binding, of course, but the United Nations believed that it would set an important standard for the treatment of indigenous peoples and would represent a significant tool towards eliminating human rights violations and discrimination against the world's 370 million indigenous people. 143 countries endorsed the declaration, but 4 countries opposed it. Those 4 countries are the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Would you comment, Dr. Young, on some of the reasons behind that vote?
Yeah, I thought this treaty might come up. I'm way out of my office, grabbed the coffee to think about it a little bit. I think it's hard to say. The United Kingdom, by the way, did sign on to it. It was the U.S., New Zealand, Australia, and Canada that did not. And I don't know why Canada, New Zealand, and Australia didn't, although one can suspect the worst. And one might also suspect the worst out of our government. But I think, I mean, I've worked in the human rights field as a professional matter for 20 plus years, and I think my sense is the U.S. government would probably defend their position, and did a little bit. They issued some statements on probably 2 bases, I would suspect, a sort of a set of conceptual concerns and a set of kind of prudential or practical concerns. The conceptual concerns are really relatively simple to state, and then they lead into the practical concerns. Conceptual concerns really probably fall in 2 large categories. One is the United States and France, in countless negotiations, have taken an interesting position which runs a little counter to most of the other Europeans and many of the other Western powers, and it is that individuals, not groups, have rights. And so when you're talking about the articulation of a right, a collective doesn't have a right. The individuals within the collective have the right. And indigenous rights blurs that line. And Um, and not that it is totally unacceptable to blur it, but if you do, you end up with a whole set of practical concerns, and I'll raise just a few of those in a minute. The second set of concerns, I think, and there may be a second set of concerns, really have to do with some disagreement, I think, with much of the G77 and the developing world over how one conceptualizes a right to begin with. There is under UNESCO and so forth this sense of a right to development. The U.S. has opposed that right because their argument, I think, has historically been development's not a right, it's a consequence. You set up appropriate economic and political and other structures that kind of unleash the entrepreneurial capacity of people, and you will get development. But it's not, you don't have a right to development, you have, it is a consequence of the sensible policies. And there's a lot of things in this document that really, I think one would plausibly argue, are really a consequence of policies, not a right. And so I think there's sort of some conceptual challenges, but the practical ramifications that then become pretty significant, because if you grant a group a right, as this treaty does, grants participation in the political process, unique participation, it is fair to say it's a terribly drafted treaty. And I think any legal scholar would be forced to agree with the U.S. that it doesn't address these problems. I mean, how do you take a system where you have individuals who participate in sort of government structures of a constitutionally prescribed kind, and put an overlay of independently formed groups that, as they are entitled to under this, operate with entirely their own set of rules? Not that it can't be done. I mean, I think we've struggled with it in the U.S. for 250 years. I mean, this is an important thing for us to think about. But the treaty is breathtakingly unhelpful in terms of trying to do that. It forces you into a model without any guidelines and sense of how one executes that model. Property rights are another issue. That indigenous peoples entitled to certain kind of historic properties, in which you may already have a very significant overlay of other property rights. Perfectly fair area to debate, but the treaty does nothing to help advance or direct it. And then you have the problem of if you grant a group a set of rights, then the individuals within that group are capable of being governed in a particular way by that group. But you have no discussion of what the constraints and limits on that governance pattern are. And so you essentially potentially create a governance structure and give a whole set of governance rights on the one hand, without any kind of what we might call sort of constitutional constraints on what that group can do to the individuals within the group. And this treaty, again, does nothing to except propel you in a direction without any capacity to solve these very challenging problems. And then there's the really major overarching problem of self-determination. I mean, this is the major tension that runs through the Helsinki Accords. I mean, the Helsinki Accords fix the boundaries of Europe and give everybody a right of self-determination. But the relationship between sort of pre-existing borders and government structures and so forth on the one hand, and self-determination of groups within those borders on the other, is a very vexing, difficult issue in which this treaty is singularly unhelpful. And I think they would defend it probably on the grounds, and that is essentially what happened. This was being debated as a larger document designed for consensus and so forth, and the chair actually decided the year 2007 was the year of something or other. The UN declares a whole series of years. He wanted to participate in that, so he actually tabled this in between negotiating sessions and said this is the final document, many of the provisions of which had never been debated and so forth. So I think it's an interesting exercise because it really highlights what makes so much of this so complex. Not insoluble, but it's certainly the case that very few countries have gone very far towards real capacity to address that in a way that doesn't engender more conflict. And I think Forrest was really identifying, 250 years later, he walks down to the Capitol and our people in a state named after Indians hasn't got it right. So it's very complex, I think, in that regard. And I don't think there's any sense that this provides a whole lot of help. It's aspirational, and that's terrific. Pay attention to this, but beyond that, it doesn't help you think through any of these really kind of complex, where the sort of rubber meets the road kind of issues.
Any comments?
Oh, yo tuve la suerte de haber llegado a las Naciones Unidas desde el año 82.
I've had the honor to be involved with the United Nations since 1982.
Y me tocó ver la creación del grupo de trabajo sobre poblaciones indígenas, posteriormente las luchas por el decenio internacional de los pueblos indígenas.
And I had the opportunity to be a part of the Organization for Indigenous Peoples.
Y durante muchos años se discutió esta declaración.
And for many years this declaration was talked about.
Y parecía un teatro donde se hacían escenas exactamente iguales cada año.
And it just looked like a theater where the same scenes were repeated year after year.
Por ejemplo, la interminable discusión sobre si deberían de llamarse pueblos originarios, pueblos indígenas, primeras naciones, etc.
For example, the endless discussion on whether they should be called the original peoples, the indigenous peoples, the First Nations, or what.
Y el concepto de pueblos creo que fue el más ilustrativo. Si algún experto de aquí revisara los documentos, los discursos de cada país del planeta, la objeción era al reconocimiento de pueblos.
And the most problematic was the concept of people and what should be
Peoples,
considered
la S.
peoples and what should be considered a people.
Parecía chistoso que una S hace una diferencia.
And it was funny to think that just the S would make the difference, the S at the end of the word.
Y nosotros reclamábamos pueblos y los gobiernos decían población.
And what we wanted was peoples, and the governments wanted population.
Y si hablaban de pueblo tendrían que quitarle la S, o sea, pueblo, no pueblos, porque la S hacía la diversidad.
And they didn't want to talk about peoples in the plural, they wanted to talk about people in the singular because the plural would mean diversity.
Los conceptos de autodeterminación, era muy claro para nosotros autodeterminación, en tanto que los pueblos indígenas tenían un sistema que se autodeterminó durante largos años. O sea, el hecho de que no estaba dentro de las legislaciones nacionales es que tenía una autodeterminación.
And the concept of self-determination was crucial for us because we had had a system for years that was not within the national system, but existed anyway.
Y para nosotros era muy obvio que defendemos nuestra autodeterminación y los países sacaban todos los fantasmas de las fronteras, de seguridad nacional, de temas que en realidad no iba con lo que nosotros planteábamos.
And while we were defending our right for self-determination, the countries worried about the usual ghosts of borders and national security.
Pero en algún momento los pueblos indígenas eran como los chivos expiatorios de problemas más globales. Si se daba libertad a los indígenas, ¿tendrían libertad las mujeres? ¿Tendrían libertad los chinos? ¿Tendrían libertad las otras culturas y los otros pueblos? O sea, dependía de un hilo libertades fundamentales para otros pueblos del planeta, ¿no?
Giving freedom and the right to choose to indigenous peoples would be dangerous because that would imply extending the same freedom to other groups, to women, to other cultures, and that would be a dangerous precedent.
Y más que el problema no eran los pueblos indígenas, pero a través de los pueblos indígenas se expresaban miles y miles de pueblos oprimidos, ocupados en el planeta.
And the issue was that through the indigenous peoples, other peoples that were oppressed all over the world find their voice.
Pero hay un tema muy delicado que aún no está concluido hoy.
But there's a very delicate issue that is not closed yet.
Y es el tema de la tierra.
It's the issue of land.
La tierra para el occidente forma parte de un recurso material
In the Western world, the land is a material resource.
y para los pueblos indígenas forma parte de un recurso espiritual.
And for the indigenous peoples, it's a spiritual resource.
Es cosmovisión, o sea, es la esencia de nuestra cosmovisión.
It's the essence of our cosmovision.
Para nosotros la tierra, los cerros, las piedras más altas, es parte de nuestro sitio sagrado.
The land, the mountains, the rocks are our sacred places.
Y que inspira la vida y tiene energías cósmicas.
And that's where we find inspiration and cosmic energy.
Y para el occidente es un recurso que hay que explotarlo.
For the Western world, it's a resource that's there to be taken advantage of.
Y es aquí donde viene el conflicto de las minerías,
And that's
el
what
problema minero.
causes the mining problem.
Y pues en Guatemala apenas inicia las controversias en relación a la explotación minera.
And this is something that's just starting to be a problem in Guatemala.
Y ya empezó con muertos, ya empezó con confrontaciones.
And there have been conflicts and people have died because of it.
Y justo es lo que dice esta declaración, cuando dice que los pueblos indígenas tienen derecho a ejercer sus derechos sobre sus tierras, sus territorios, ¿verdad? Y hay otra palabra que dice, deberán ser consultados sobre medidas que se deban tomar sobre sus territorios.
And that's exactly what this declaration says when it mentions that the indigenous peoples have a right over their lands and they must be consulted anytime any decision is made that affects their land.
La palabra consulta es una flecha en el hígado de los sistemas opresores,
And the word consulted is like an arrow to the heart of the oppressing system.
porque para ellos no puede haber consulta a una población que ni siquiera existe según algunas legislaciones nacionales.
Because why would they talk to a people that doesn't even exist according to their national legislation?
Así que aquí hay una lucha jurídica, pero también hay una lucha política. Hay una voluntad jurídica que tenemos que adecuar esta declaración a la legislación nacional, la legislación regional, pero también hay una lucha política y emana las dos cosas.
So there's a legal and a political side of the problem because this needs to be adapted to the laws of the country. But there's also a political fight because it has political consequences.
Los canadienses son los primeros países que se oponían radicalmente porque los hermanos indígenas del Canadá han demostrado su lucha por sus territorios. Si venía una ley internacional, ellos ya veían fantasmas igual que los brasileños, igual que Nueva Zelanda, toda la lucha que ha habido. Y aquí en Estados Unidos, pues para mí no es muy extraño porque todas, absolutamente todas, las resoluciones tomadas en relación a la declaración fueron objetados por Estados Unidos durante toda la historia de esta declaración.
Canada was the first country to oppose the declaration because the indigenous peoples in Canada always organized themselves and fought for their land rights. And the same thing happened in Brazil and in New Zealand. In the United States, the government has always opposed the declaration from day one, from the very beginning.
Y creo que lo que más molestaba a Estados Unidos es la autodeterminación, ¿verdad? Ustedes saben las guerras que ha hecho este país en contra de pueblos que se quieren liberar y mucho menos que se liberen los indígenas. O sea, este es un tema muy de fondo, ¿no?
And what really bothered the United States, I think, was the issue of self-determination. The United States has a history of opposing self-determination, and they were afraid that indigenous peoples would want to exercise that right to self-determination as well.
O sea, aquí dentro de esta declaración hay temas muy profundas, muy. Y afortunadamente esto es producto de una lucha donde los indígenas sí estuvieron poniendo año con año la presión en Ginebra, en Nueva York, año con sus propios recursos, no con recursos del Estado ni con recursos formales, no, con sus propios recursos.
And this declaration is the result of a long fight of indigenous people in Geneva, in New York, and all that done with their own resources, without any help from anyone.
Okay, I'm beginning to sense some interest among audience members to participate in this conversation. So let us invite comments or questions at this point. Yes.
Tal vez si me va traduciendo, no me acerquen.
Sí.
Group approach to life and the individual. And that is, because you mentioned about the problem with that resolution, that the United States and others in Western civilizations look at rights as being the rights of the individual, whereas in indigenous communities it is more of a collective right.
Mm-hmm.
How does that come together? How can that be meshed to resolve?
La pregunta es que parece que hay un conflicto entre la idea de derechos del grupo y derechos del individuo. ¿Cómo puede uno combinar las dos cosas, ¿no?
En un sentido práctico, es posible encontrar soluciones siempre y cuando haya espacios para hacerlo. Yo no veo ningún problema de ejercer los derechos colectivos y los derechos individuales, porque de hecho vivimos en un mundo de derechos colectivos y derechos individuales. Aquí ninguna persona solo tiene derecho solito, hay derechos individuales y colectivos.
We all have individual rights as individuals and group rights as members of a group. So technically, from a very practical point of view, that should not be a problem to bring those two things together, as long as there's a space for that meeting of the two.
Y es más, yo no encontraría como problemática los derechos individuales y colectivos. Por lo menos tenemos en la Declaración Universal los derechos civiles y políticos, que son derechos colectivos e individuales.
In my view, that should not be a problem. The Declaration gives room to civil and political rights, and those are rights of individuals and groups.
El problema fundamental para mí como maya radica en que tenemos dos sistemas, dos civilizaciones, una civilización ancestral y otra civilización igualmente tiene rasgos ancestrales, o sea, la civilización occidental. En esas dos civilizaciones no hay comunicación.
To me, as a Mayan woman, the problem stems from the fact that we have two separate and different civilizations, and both of them with a long history, but separate and different.
Y en estos dos sistemas se ha querido traducir el idioma español en maya o inglés en maya Pero no es traducción lo que necesitamos. Necesitamos interpretar. Es una interpretación la que yo quiero hacer en mi sistema, digamos.
And we have tried to translate one system to the other. But what we need really is not a translation, it's an interpretation of one system into the other.
En esa interpretación de sistemas, yo encuentro un vacío enorme en el tema de que el sistema occidental, su ley es punitivo. En materia de derechos, su ley es punitivo, es castigo.
And a fundamental problem that I find in that interpretation is the fact that in the Western civilization, the legal system is punitive.
Ujú. Y en el sistema maya, en este caso el sistema ancestral, es preventivo.
While in the Mayan system, it's preventive.
No es la cárcel el que vale, sino vale prevenir el delito a través de la conciliación, del diálogo, y ahí es donde viene el derecho colectivo. El derecho colectivo es la vergüenza pública, digamos.
And the solution in our system is not jail. The solution is preventing crime, working before it happens. And that's where collective rights come into place, because it's collective shame that prevents you from committing a crime.
Y aquí viene el tema de los valores. No todos los valores se pueden escribir, sino más bien se transmiten los valores.
And that's, again, an issue of values, because not all values can be written. They are passed on from generation to generation, but not written.
Pero yo no veo perdido la esperanza de hacer un sistema plural en las que prevalezcan la equidad. Porque si estamos equitativamente en una mesa, es la ilustración de que es posible sentarse juntos, ¿no?
But I'm still hopeful that a plural system based on equity is still possible, because if we're sitting together at the same table, that's an indication that there's hope.
My response to you is that the Western society, we need to develop some courage and integrity and respect. And we're going to have to deal with our arrogance that suggests that we have all the right answers. You see what I'm saying? We have to really start asking the difficult questions. Is our penal system working? Last I heard, we can't build enough prisons. And right now we don't have the money to do it. Is our immigration policy, appropriate? My understanding is that under the Bush administration, Bush pulled his people out of Kyoto negotiations. He also pulled his people out of the Mideastern talks. See, that to me is wrong. That's guaranteed to generate conflict, because that is a lack of courage to stay at the table and keep the dialogue going. You see, and that's exactly what needs to take place right now. We might not always agree on the treaties, but we need to stay with those discussions until we get the correct treaty, and then we need to live up to it. Sometimes when we came up with the most perfect treaty, we've never lived up to it. We haven't certainly lived up to the Versailles Treaty when we're torturing criminals, terrorists. We're starting to violate our own human rights policies in this country. We're starting to violate our own rules. And that's really frightening. We've become a fear-based society. We base most of our decisions and policies based on how much fear is generated. 9/11, our whole policy from then on was fear-based. And what did it do? It generated more fear. What I hear the Honorable Rigoberta Menchú suggest is that there is another way. There's another way of viewing the world. There's another way of interacting. And it's a world of process. Might not have all the solutions, but part of the answer is in the process, in the dialogue, in the discussion. And not all the rules are found in science. some of are found in the spirit world. You know, our people used to say, all things are related. Our elders used to tell us that. And scientists used to laugh at us, up until just recently, because the quantum physicists are proving us right. They're proving that that philosophy is correct, and that all things are related. And if all things are related, that suggests that we need to stop this fighting, this dualism between the head and the heart, between science and spirit, etc., etc. And maybe stay at the table and for once, come up with different solutions that might benefit all people instead of just one particular group or one individual. Okay? That's what I would suggest.
¿Quiere que le traduzca la respuesta, más o menos?
No, no, no.
Okay, let's take another question. Yes.
First of all, I just want to say I really appreciate you coming here and speaking. I really think very highly of you and to all of the panel. Thank you very much. But to respond to that question, to really engage in social transformation, do we have that balance? Is dialogue at the table enough? Or do we need to engage in other types of struggles or alternative strategies to bring forth change?
¿Es suficiente con tener un diálogo sobre la mesa como para conseguir el cambio, o es necesario buscar otras estrategias, otras luchas, otras formas de hacer que ese cambio ocurra?
I think it's very important, the participation, because I have a choice. I can stay in one place and I say I am happy and I make my things, but the real participation es una necesidad, la verdadera y real participación de los pueblos de que se trata. Y en este caso los pueblos indígenas no pueden ser ajenos a la discusión de sus derechos.
We need to participate. That's a real and pressing need, and indigenous peoples need to participate in the struggles that affect them.
O sea, no pueden ser ajenos a la discusión de los temas que les interesa, que les afecta la vida, la cultura, la existencia.
They can't be left out of those discussions that affect them, that affect their life and their well-being.
Y lo peor es que los países donde somos mayoría, los pueblos indígenas no existen en la agenda política.
And even in the countries where we are a majority, in the political agenda, we just simply don't exist.
En el caso de Ecuador, Perú, Guatemala, Bolivia se habla porque hay un presidente indígena. Pero si no existiera un presidente indígena, los indígenas no serían una fuerza real en el país.
And people talk about the indigenous peoples in Bolivia just because there's a president that happens to be from an indigenous people. Otherwise, nobody would talk about them.
Y creo que es urgente lograr la verdadera participación de los pueblos indígenas. Yo no creo que haya otro camino. O sea, por el momento yo creo que la lucha armada no es el camino. Porque si fuera el camino, yo en lugar de hacer paz estaría haciendo la guerra. ¿Verdad? Pero lo más importante es crear nuevos instrumentos, nuevos escenarios que permita una real participación.
And participation from the indigenous peoples is crucial. There's no other way. If there was another way, I wouldn't be talking about peace, I would be talking about war. And it's become very clear that another armed conflict is not going to solve anything. We need people to participate and to engage in that struggle.
Sorry.
Tienen que hablar lo que dice el presidente es que quizás podemos continuar la conversación sobre un poco de comida y bebidas. Next door. perhaps we ought to continue the conversation right downstairs in the Duncan Room through a formal reception that the president is hosting for us on this MLK celebration day. So we invite you to join us downstairs through those rear doors, and we would be very happy to continue the conversation.
One quick comment, though, in response to that.
Sure.
One thing occurred to me is that, you know, the time might come when Martin Luther King's resistance, nonviolent resistance, may have to be exercised by white folks in this country in order to bring more justice and balance to our very own country. That's one thing that's occurred to me, because it's like we always think of the civil rights struggle applying to only us, people of color, but I think the day's coming when folks are going to have to look across the street to see to what extent it might apply to other folks. So I just wanted to leave that with you.
One last comment.
I warmly applaud any other form of struggle, except on the part of students who should be quiet and go to class. I would actually echo what Chris just said, which is, I alluded to it today as I had the privilege of introducing our guest. If you look at the last years of Dr. King's life and his writings in that period, he had actually shifted in a very interesting way to class struggle and looking at issues of poverty and barriers to poverty writ large, regardless of racial composition and so forth. And I think that much of that's been lost in terms of our thinking about creating the kind of society that we want. That the struggle that so many people of color are engaged in is a struggle that really has many more allies than I think we sometimes recognize and should. And there's a power in that to transform society in a way that does enormous, maybe disproportionate good for people of color, but I don't think so. I think it does disproportionate good for the entire United States. And I think if there's probably no better time than right now to be thinking about that, because we will be going through a period where we will be restructuring so much of our fundamental economic and political world. And I think if broader coalitions developed along those kinds of lines that he helped begin to identify, which we've lost a little bit, I think there's a wonderful power in there to make some of the changes, to exhibit some of the kind of courage that Forrest and Mrs. Montu have suggested to us today. And I would add that a lot of it is, in my judgment, a reflection ultimately of the maturity of societies, their capacity to really robustly embrace that great Lockean principle that allows government to be viewed as something that unleashes the creative power and energies of people, and not something that controls and restricts. And that is a sign of growth and maturity in a society and in a government, but something that requires the kind of loosing of some of the reins of power held by people who may not be so comfortable letting go of those reins of power. But I think we may be, oddly enough, as much economic dislocation as we're facing in the United States, this may be an opportunity and not, in addition to a challenge.
But Malcolm X used the term "by any means necessary." So is that something worthy to consider and embrace in terms of moving towards social transformation?
Not for students. At least not till after they graduate.
Thank you, panelists, and all of you for coming. Why don't we move over to the dumpster room?
Thank you. Oh, I hope to see you again.